Alright, so we've got our paper mache piece here, and I've done a few different finishes. So you can see here I've gessoed it with the white gesso, which also could be acrylic paint. And here I've treated it with like a plain newsprint, which you can sometimes find in packaging as padding. And then here I've done it with brown paper, which also could be found as packaging or maybe like a paper bag. And then here I used, if you remember, the patch, like the wall patch, and I've sanded it a little in some areas and I've left it rough in some areas. And you could go ahead and sand some of the gessoed areas too if you wanted to knock down some of those kind of high points, right? So now I have to think about finishing. So depending on what materials you have, that's going to really determine how you finish it. So, you know, take stock of what you have. One option, of course, would be to use paint. Acrylic paint is great. All right, so I just have a little bit of paint here, and you could just go straight into this and start painting, right? Think about what you want your surface to look like. Do you want it to be really solid, in which case just going ahead and painting is the way to go, right? And you might need a few layers depending on how thin or thick your paint is as well, and that partly is determined by the color. You don't have to use acrylic paint, so it could also be, say, tempera, which is a water-based paint. So acrylic, when it dries, will be like a hard plastic, whereas tempera, when it dries, if you get it wet, it will resaturate. You could also water down your acrylic, so I could actually treat this similar to a watercolor or a wash. And so I could go with this and get a really thinner layer. And you can, of course, also do this with watercolor, right? So it doesn't have to be limited to acrylic paint. But of course, the nice thing about this is that it won't run. I like to use the wash in combination with a solid. So I would actually paint this piece solid, let it dry, and then choose another color and go over it with a wash. And it creates a really nice layering effect for a little more depth. I like washes because they will highlight some of the texture, which in this case, perhaps I like. The other thing I could do, like I said, is I could use watercolor. And it depends on how you finished your piece. So right now I'm painting over the gesso, but if I paint over the paper, it is going to accept the paint differently because it doesn't have that protective gesso coating, so it's going to absorb it more, and it does mean you're going to see these layers. So if you're using a painted area, I would recommend perhaps going towards a dry material to finish the top. So a crayon could work, right? The only thing here is that, of course, it's going to really highlight your high points. So take a crayon, and if you take the wrapping off of it so you can use more than just the pointy end, you can go over your piece. This could also work really well in combination with paint. So if I let this dry and then go back over, it's another way of layering. And if I wanted to really get some darker areas, I could go in more with a pointed end. And you can also check what your crayon is made out of. If it is water soluble, you could go back in with a a brush with water on it. And I think this one might be, and kind of thin it down. Sorry, my brush had some paint on it. And so you can actually see, or perhaps you can see that it's starting to kind of dilute that crayon. So you can always see what it's made out of, and if it's oil-based, you could see if you have any, solvent to break that down. Or color pencil could also work. This, of course, is going to work better on a flatter surface, right? So getting into all these little crevices and everything is totally possible, but it's going to have its own kind of technical challenges to reach it. And a marker could work as well. So if you want to cover a large surface area, paint is going to be your best bet, just because with the brush and the liquidness of the paint, it's going to be able to get into the areas. And again, it doesn't have to be acrylic paint. It could be tempera, it could be watercolor, it could be nail polish, it could be house paint, it could be paint that you've created out of, say, like a dye or a household material. So I'll kind of add some information on that if you're interested. So kind of take stock of what you have, and you might do a little test on a piece of paper or piece of cardboard or even a sample piece here, and kind of see how you want to treat the surface. I find that, like I said, layering can be really effective. So I really might come back in with another material over this acrylic and kind of bulk it up.